Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and this is Voice of the Global South. All right then, let's get started on the show this week. If you thought only women are getting a raw deal in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan, think again. The radical group does not spare men either. A short beard or long hair can land them in jail. Israel establishes a new security corridor in Gaza, cuts off the city of Rafah from the rest of the Palestinian enclave. We tell you how and why. And India to ramp up its ties with Saudi Arabia during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Jeddah. As members of the Global South, India and Saudi Arabia have it in them to influence global outcomes. All that and much, much more coming up on Voice of the Global South. This week, we turn our attention to Afghanistan, where the Taliban's iron grip is tightening, not just on women, but on men too. While the world has tended to focus on the severe restrictions imposed on women's education, movement and expression, a lesser-known story is emerging. Afghan men are also facing arrests, executions and punishments for failing to comply with the Taliban's rigid morality laws. Since the Taliban regained power in August 2021, it has issued tens of decrees targeting women's autonomy, banning girls from secondary education, and prohibiting women from most jobs, public spaces, and even singing in public. According to the UN Women, 80% of girls, that is about 1.1 million of them, are out of school. Women must wear full face coverings and cannot travel long distances without a male guardian or chaperone, locally known as mehram. Now, long distance is defined as any journey that involves traveling for more than 72 kilometers. Women are barred from working for national and international non-governmental organizations. They're also banned from health studies, nursing, and midwifery courses. In 2022, women were banned from flying alone on both domestic and international flights, complicating departures for some women who were offered scholarships to study at universities abroad. But men are not spared either. In August 2024, the Taliban codified a 35-article morality law mandating men to grow fist-length beards, banning Western-style haircuts, and prohibiting clothing such as jeans that imitate non-Muslims. The morality police has detained men and their barbers for a wrong hairstyle. An April 2025 report by the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan says in the first 6 months of implementation of the law, over half of the arbitrary detentions concern men's appearance, either men not having the compliant beard length or hairstyle, or barbers providing non-compliant beard trimming or haircuts. You see the man in the center? His beard is kosher for the Taliban. It is legit. But according to a new 6-point list of rules for barbers, the hairstyle of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un or US actor Leonardo DiCaprio is not kosher. Also, beards should be no shorter than 1 strand and men's eyebrows should not be trimmed, and barbers should not play music in their shops. The morality police, also known as inspectors, operate under what is known as the Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice. The ministry's guidelines cover aspects of everyday life such as public transportation, music, shaving, and celebrations. Now, they are set out in a 114-page document. The laws empower the ministry to be at the front line of regulating personal conduct, administering punishments such as warnings or arrest if inspectors allege that a person has broken the laws. 3,300 male inspectors are deployed in 28 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. 540 of them are deployed in Kabul alone. The inspectors have extensive powers, including the right to detain individuals for up to 3 days and to destroy property such as musical instruments. And talking about music, Wahid Negzai Logari played in Afghanistan's national orchestra and performed concerts on the sarinda, a traditional stringed instrument, as well as the harmonium. But the Taliban has prohibited public performance of music, deeming it un-Islamic, leaving musicians such as Logari destitute. The Taliban's brutality extends beyond detentions as well. For instance, Amnesty International reported at least 218 extrajudicial killings of former government officials and security personnel between August 2021 and June 2023. On 13th April, 4 men were publicly executed for murder convictions, a move condemned by the UN and rights groups. It was the highest number of executions to be carried out in one day since the Taliban's return to power. The executions at sports stadiums in 3 separate provinces brought to 10 the number of men publicly put to death since 2021. The previous execution was in November 2024 when a convicted murderer was shot 3 times in the chest by a member of the victim's family in front of thousands of spectators, including high-ranking Taliban officials, at a stadium in Gardes, the capital of Paktia province in the country's east. Corporal punishment, mainly flogging, is common for crimes such as theft, adultery, and consumption of alcohol. But that's not all. A new law bans news media from using photographs and videos of things with souls, meaning people and animals. Consequently, TV channels have stopped showing images of living beings during their broadcasts, in line with orders from the morality police. One private TV channel only displays a logo along with audio. The UN and human rights groups are calling for accountability, but the Taliban remains defiant. It rejects Western laws and international criticism. Taliban leader Hibatullah Akhundzada defends these acts by saying Islam is a comprehensive system of all divine commands. But some in the global community disagree. In January 2025, the International Criminal Court issued warrants against Akhundzada and others for crimes against humanity, including gender persecution. The Taliban had a strict facial hair regime even during its previous rule between 1996 and 2001. A man's beard had to be long enough to exceed a fist clasped at the chin. The Taliban had developed a creative way back then to check whether a man's beard met the religiously mandated length. It asked men to put their beard inside a lantern glass to see if it fit. Those whose beards were deemed too short were punished. The recent diktats have come as a shock for Afghan men. A government employee had his salary withheld because his beard wasn't sufficiently long. Drivers are earning less and barbers are going out of business. As Western media reported, in a society where a man's voice is seen as more powerful than a woman's, some men now wonder whether they should have spoken up sooner to defend the freedoms of their wives and daughters. Israeli troops deployed to a newly established security corridor across southern Gaza. The new Morak corridor cuts off the southern city of Rafah from the rest of Gaza. Israel hopes that doing so will put pressure on the Hamas to release the remaining hostages. Ragini Sudhir Chaure reports on how Gaza's geography and its people's future is being redrawn one corridor at a time.
Last night in the Gaza Strip, we switched gears. The IDF is seizing territory, striking the terrorists, and destroying the infrastructure. We are also doing something else. We are seizing the Morag corridor.
אנחנו תופסים את ציר מורג.
Within 2 weeks of Netanyahu making the announcement, Hamas was singing a different tune.
Movement is ready to immediately negotiate a deal to swap all hostages with an agreed number of Palestinians jailed by Israel, to end completely the war against our people, and to fully withdraw from Gaza Strip and to start the reconstruction in Gaza.
مقابل الوقف التام للحرب.
Why did its Gaza chief Khalil al-Hayya make a televised statement on 17th of April, calling for talks on a possible deal to end the war? What made Hamas change its mind? And why now? The answer lies in the capture of the Morag corridor, also known as Morag Axis, by Israeli forces. The Morag corridor is an Israeli security corridor in the southern Gaza Strip. Netanyahu announced the establishment of the new corridor on 2nd of April. By the 12th, Israel had fully taken over the tiny sliver of land. It is named after a former Jewish community of Morag that once existed between Rafah and Khan Yunis. This Jewish settlement was established in 1972 after the Israeli forces took over Gaza in 1967. It was one of a number of Israeli communities built in Gaza that were dismantled in 2005 during the Israeli disengagement from the enclave. The Morag corridor now cuts through the southern part of Gaza between Rafah and Khan Yunis. It effectively seals off southern Gaza city of Rafah from the rest of the Palestinian enclave. It creates a third Israeli-controlled axis, dividing sections of Gaza. It joins two other key military checkpoints: the Philadelphia corridor along the Egyptian border, that Israeli forces seized the Philadelphia corridor last year, and the Netzarim corridor that cuts off northern Gaza. The Netzarim corridor was taken over by Israel in 2023 and held until the January 2025 ceasefire. Israel then retook part of Netzarim corridor in March when its forces began a new operation. Together, these moves signal something far more comprehensive than a mere tactical advance. More than 50% of Gaza is now effectively under Israeli control. Netanyahu says that the establishment of the Morag corridor is intended to increase the pressure on Hamas to release remaining hostages and surrender control of the territory.
This will be the second Philadelphia and additional Philadelphia corridor, because we are now dividing the strip and increasing pressure step by step so that they will give us our hostages. And as long as they do not give them to us, the pressure will increase until they do. We are determined to achieve the objective of the war, and we are acting relentlessly and with a clear line and a clear mission. And with God's help and that of our heroic soldiers, we will also achieve them.
On 12th of April, Israeli forces completed the encirclement of Rafah as part of an announced plan to seize more areas of the enclave, accompanied by large-scale evacuations of the population. Footage released by the Israeli army along with the statement purported to show a brigade of troops marching past rubble and entering empty buildings in Rafah. The Israeli military has issued repeated evacuation warnings to hundreds of thousands of Palestinians across Rafah since it resumed operations in Gaza on 18th of March, forcing them into a diminishing space limited by the sea. Rafah, once considered a relative refuge for over 1 million displaced Palestinians, may now be the next epicenter of Israel's ongoing ground operations. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced plans to expand military activity across most of Gaza, but the statement gave no indication of where the Palestinians, who have already been displaced many times, are expected to go. Instead, it calls on civilians to remove Hamas from power and release the remaining hostages, suggesting that this and only this could stop the war. Palestinian officials call this a breach of international legitimacy. Human rights groups are raising the alarm, accusing Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war. For more than a month, Gaza has endured a blockade on food, fuel, and humanitarian aid. Aid agencies dispute the Israeli claims that sufficient provisions entered the area during a brief 2-month ceasefire. Meanwhile, supplies are running dry.
But it is for a legal reference to say and describe exactly what does that mean. Because according to that, there will be accountability for those perpetrators of this crime. For sure, it is a crime. In any legal law, even civil law, a crime means punishment. Why not in such crimes?
This strategic tightening, coupled with a growing buffer zone, appears aimed not just at Hamas, but at reshaping the geography of Gaza itself. According to a report published by the Haaretz newspaper, Israel's military is pushing to annex Rafah into an expanded buffer zone. This 75 square kilometer area would wipe out any possibility of the return of civilians, a move that the paper warns could amount to the erasure of Rafah as a city. What's unfolding mirrors a previous strategy seen in northern Gaza, dubbed the General's Plan. That operation razed entire districts and forcibly emptied towns. Now, the same blueprint seems to be playing out in the south, one neighborhood at a time. Human rights groups say that any proposal encouraging the Palestinians to voluntarily relocate to other countries, as mentioned by Minister Katz, aligns with what they describe as ethnic cleansing, which is the forced removal of a population from their homeland. The war has taken a human toll on both sides. Gaza's health ministry reports that more than 50,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have died since the war began. Israel, on the other hand, claims to have eliminated 20,000 militants, but has offered little public evidence of it. Pressure is mounting inside Israel as well. The families of the remaining 59 hostages, including 24 believed to be alive, are demanding swift negotiations. A newly released video of a US-Israeli hostage, Edan Alexander, has added to the public outcry. The war, which began with the 7th of October 2023 attacks by Hamas in Israel, has killed 1,200 Israelis. But as Israel's operations deepen, the line between counter-terrorism and collective punishment grows increasingly blurred. The question remains. With no clear safe zone, dwindling resources, and no ceasefire in sight, when can Gaza's civilians go? The landscape is changing, not just militarily, but existentially. What remains of Gaza's geography and its people's future is now being redrawn, one corridor at a time. Ragini Sudhir Chore for DD India.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Saudi Arabia comes at a time of great flux in the geopolitical order. The world in general and West Asia in particular is suffering from conflicts made worse by economic tensions. India and Saudi Arabia are the two fastest growing economies in the world today. As members of the Global South and the G20, they have it in them to influence global outcomes. Remarkably, both Prime Minister Modi and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman are on good terms with Trump, Putin and Zelensky. While India has built strong ties with Israel, Saudi Arabia normalized its relations with Iran in 2023. Prime Minister Modi is the first Indian leader in more than 4 decades to visit Jeddah. All his previous visits have been to Riyadh. Indira Gandhi was the last Indian Prime Minister to visit Jeddah in the year 1982. Now, Jeddah is Saudi Arabia's second largest city after Riyadh. It's located along the Red Sea coast in the Hejaz region. Jeddah is the commercial center of Saudi Arabia and the gateway to Mecca and Medina, the holiest cities in Islam. Prime Minister Modi enjoys a personal rapport with Crown Prince Salman, who is also the kingdom's Prime Minister.
He himself has an excellent relationship with the Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman, who has also visited India. Prime Minister Modi has been there, and his next visit is likely to further enrich the ties that we have.
The two leaders have met 7 times before 2025. They last met at the G20 summit hosted by New Delhi in September 2023. The Saudi leader took part in the launch of the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor on the margins of the summit. The corridor promises to be a transformative initiative for trade, infrastructure and energy cooperation across Asia and Europe. Prime Minister Modi's visit takes place 70 years after King Saud became the first Saudi royal to visit India in 1955. King Abdullah's visit to India in 2006 was a watershed moment in bilateral relations. Since then, the relationship has evolved into a strategic partnership. Now, Prime Minister Modi's maiden visit to Saudi Arabia was in 2016 when he received the kingdom's highest civilian award, the King Abdulaziz Sash. It was the first of 22 foreign honours bestowed on Prime Minister Modi since he came to power in 2014. The year 2019 saw Crown Prince Salman visit India in February and Prime Minister Modi pay a reciprocal visit in October. That year, both countries set up what is known as the Strategic Partnership Council to steer the relationship in a new direction. The pace of other bilateral engagements has picked up too. Since January 2024 alone, there have been 11 ministerial visits from India to Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is home to a large Indian diaspora. 3 million Indian nationals live and work in the kingdom. Bilateral trade stands at $43 billion. The balance of trade favors Saudi Arabia as India imports 3 times more from the kingdom than it exports to it. Saudi Arabia is India's 5th largest trade partner and the 3rd biggest source of oil and LPG. The kingdom accounts for 18% of India's oil imports. For Saudi Arabia, India is its 2nd largest trade partner. The India-Saudi Arabia relationship has expanded to defense cooperation. The first defense ministerial visit from India to Saudi Arabia in 12 years took place in 2024. Both countries have held the maiden army exercise codenamed Sada Tanseek 1 in 2024 and 2 editions of the Al Mohid Al Hind naval exercise. India's ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Sohail Ejaz Khan, places the kingdom at the top of India's trusted defense partners. Saudi Arabia has expressed an interest in sharing localized defense technologies and ramping up joint ventures. With Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 targeting 50% localization of defense spending and India's Make in India campaign gaining momentum, both sides are eyeing synergies in defense production. Recently, Saudi Arabia signed a $250 million deal with Munitions India Limited. On the cultural front, India was a guest of honor at the 2018 Janadriya festival held in Saudi Arabia. Yoga has gained popularity in the kingdom. Yoga exponent Nauf Al-Marwai was awarded the Padma Shri, India's 4th highest civilian award in 2018.
See, our relationship with Saudi Arabia is one of the strongest relationships with West Asia. It is a comprehensive strategic partnership where we collaborate in bilateral, in regional and multilateral domains across the whole spectrum of the relationship.
A little-known facet of the India-Saudi Arabia relationship is the role they played in stabilizing the situation in West Asia. In March 2018, Saudi Arabia opened its airspace for the first time to a commercial flight bound for Israel. It was unprecedented because Riyadh and Tel Aviv do not have diplomatic relations. The airline chosen for this historic breakthrough was Air India, the erstwhile flag carrier of India. An Air India flight took off from New Delhi. It flew non-stop over Oman, Saudi Arabia and Jordan to reach Israel. and that ended a 70-year-old ban on planes flying to or from Israel over Saudi Arabia's airspace. Air India flew over Saudi Arabia at 40,000 feet for about 3 hours, coming within 60 kilometers of its capital, Riyadh. It crossed over into Jordan, then the occupied West Bank, before landing in Tel Aviv. The flight was the result or culmination of a behind-the-scenes activity among India, Saudi Arabia and Israel. And with that, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.